Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Brevard. Alongside me is Logan Camden, and today we are joined as well by none other than the Theo Ash NFL, of course, a friend of the show. We've had him on before. We just had his boy Matthew Sponhour on Wednesday. Now we're bringing on his boy Theo. So, how we doing today, bud?
We're doing good. I'm looking at Logan's flag behind him, and I realize that there's the binary code, and I'm wondering if it says something. Is there a secret message?
Don't worry
about
it.
LeBron hand signals
Don't worry about
before
it.
the game.
You're gonna have to decode that one yourself, pal. Learn binary, and then we'll get you a full shot of the flag.
I learned it senior year of high school, so I actually can read it perfectly.
Oh.
It says it's a date. It says something bad is gonna happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, maybe don't spoil the fun for everybody, Theo.
It's crazy you guys would put that on there.
Yeah, well, all right, let's talk about some football. So, we had an interesting Thursday night football game last night. Very exciting divisional matchup, and ends up underwhelming a bit. We see Joe Burrow go out midway through this game with what they're calling a sprained wrist. Seemed like he might have had some issues with it before the game as well that maybe went unreported, but regardless, he doesn't complete this one. So let's just start with Theo. What was your biggest takeaway from this?
That it sucked? I don't know. I was hyping this up as a potential game of the year candidate before it happened. Obviously, the Ravens and Bengals going into it looking like two of the top teams in the AFC, and then for all the injuries to happen the way they did, it was disappointing. But yeah, I mean, I don't really see how the Bengals can necessarily recover from this. Going into it, it was one of the biggest games of the week in terms of their playoff chances changing if they won or lost. Mm-hmm. For them to lose Joe Burrow, it doesn't get more over than that. I feel like at 5-5 in a great division. And so I guess that was my main takeaway is just when the Bengals were turning the corner and looking like an elite team, it just all came crashing down.
Yeah, they don't really I don't think they have any hopes of making the playoffs at this turn. They really did need this game considering how competitive the AFC North is. And look, man, I was hyping up Jake Browning a couple years ago when he had John Ross to rely on. He had a crazy season. He had 45 touchdowns.
Yeah, that was 6 years ago, though. That was probably 2017.
It was when he had John Ross, who is now retired from the NFL.
Yeah, correct.
So I wouldn't hold out hope for the Bengals' playoff chances without him. I do think did you guys think there was I feel like this conversation always happens on Thursday Night Football, and it's magnified with good teams. Do you guys feel like there was a surplus of injuries in that game that, that could have been avoided? It just sucks seeing a lot of guys go down like that, and I felt like it was a little more common. I don't know, last night. I guess maybe I don't notice it when it's the Bears and Panthers playing, but when it's two real contenders like this, I don't know. It's a real punch to the gut, man.
I think it is quantifiable that there are more injuries on Thursday night, and it just makes sense. You're playing two football games in the span of 4 days. That can do a lot. I mean, the big storyline more than what happened in the game was the drop tackling or the hip drop tackling or whatever you want to call it that you saw with Logan Wilson. And I guess that was the big piece of debate coming from this game more than any of the things that happened on the field. Which I guess my opinion on it is you either launch yourself in that situation or you don't and you hip drop. Those are your two options. You can't just continue running at him until you make up the ground. It's Mark Andrews and he's got 5 yards to go until it's the end zone, you're not going to outrun him and tackle him, he's going to score. So you got to either launch yourself or try to grab him and pull him backwards to make the tackle at all. So I don't exactly know what the NFL I know there's talk about banning that tackle. I just don't quite know what that would look like or how that could be done.
Yeah. It cracked me up that Kirk Herbstreit, I don't remember what instance it was of Logan Wilson doing that, but at one point he was just Logan Wilson's coming in with bad intentions. I was wow.
He had a kill streak, man. He hurt Odell, Lamar, and Mark Andrews in that game.
He's going to get the UAV soon, man.
He did.
He did.
Dude.
I think he unlocked it.
He may have, because he got Odell late. He was coming off grabbing his shoulder. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think he did anything like particularly dirty in that game. Like he didn't try to spear anybody or like
Right.
do anything that was too out of the ordinary. I mean, you see those hip drop tackles like a decent amount. So I don't think, like, it's unfortunate that he injured so many players by himself, but he was really a one-man wrecking crew.
Yeah. On the broader point of Thursday Night Football and its safety, I think it's interesting that we don't have conclusive data. Nobody's done a study that is like, yeah, people get significantly more frequently injured on Thursday Night Football. At least not that I've seen. In fact, if I remember correctly, most of the studies have been like there's zero difference or there's even slightly fewer injuries, which is just totally counterintuitive and doesn't make sense with anything that, first of all, you would just presume, but also that players talk about how their bodies are just starting to feel recovered by Thursday and now they have to go out there and play a full 60 minutes of football. We've had the same conversations for so long. The product is inferior to what we see on Sundays and in other primetime slots. Generally, we're sticking two shitty teams there. And when we actually put two good teams out there, both of them lose multiple key players or multiple key players get banged up at least. I think I'm just generally out on the concept of Thursday Night Football. I don't think we need it. Of course, it's never going to go back. Once you add more games to a season, once you add more primetime games, it's always going to be a revenue positive. But for the sake of the league, I really don't think it's a good thing.
I wonder if they'd ever look at moving it to Friday.
But then I think it's just the convention of that's a high school football night. And obviously Saturday's college football. It's
Well, we
like
are
all
getting-
of those weekend slots are sort of occupied.
We are getting Black Friday football, I
That's
think,
true.
upcoming.
That's true. But that's going to be a daytime game. So it's a little different.
Thursday night football just needs to up its production quality in general. Like, they just need to get better games. Al Michaels needs to stop calling a game like he's on horse tranquilizers. The one at the end of the first half just killed me. Lamar fires, caught. It was like a game-changing score. It was crazy. I think there are things that you can do to make it like a more worthy watching experience. I feel like this year is tough. All the primetime games have been bad so far this year, and there's just not a lot of good teams right now. So, like, it's tough to schedule an exciting game. But yeah, it has been completely a net negative night of football that I usually watch, offhand or don't watch at all, honestly. Like, there's better ways for me to spend my time than watching these games a lot of the times. And unfortunately, this was another instance of it. In terms of, like, other things that happened during this game, I mean, I think the Ravens were really impressive, like, on offense.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Bengals defense isn't too banged up. And I thought the line did a great job. The left tackle took some early L's to Trey Hendrickson in relief of Ronnie Stanley. But after the first quarter or so, I thought that he kind of locked in. I can't remember his
Patrick
name off the top.
McCarry, yeah.
McCarry. You guys would know. So, yeah, McCarry, I thought, held up okay, honestly, in Stanley's absence. And then the rest of the line, really, there wasn't much pressure on Lamar all night. I didn't chart too many L's. I looked at PFF. They agreed it was only 8 pressures all night, not a high number. The Ravens faced a lot of man coverage across the board, and their receivers were winning. Odell had a big night. Zay Flowers, very early in the game, had a big breakaway run after catch. Bateman, he didn't have the greatest game, but he had a touchdown against man coverage, Cam Taylor-Britt, at the end of the first half. And they were able to run the football as well, and they didn't really do it much in the first half because they were having so much success passing the ball. But when it was time to hold that lead, they were able to get the ground game going as well against a good Bengals defense. So Lamar played good, the line played good, the receivers played good against a defense that didn't have the same excuses that the offense did. So it was still an encouraging performance from the Ravens. It wasn't all Mickey Mouse because obviously the Burrow injury doesn't really affect that side of the ball.
Yeah, McCarty's been great in relief over the past couple years when Ravens O-linemen go down. He's filled in at center, he's filled in at guard, he's filled in at tackle too. We do see another key Raven go down in this game, like you guys alluded to, Mark Andrews with the ankle injury. I do want to ask, with the success that we saw from the Ravens offense, Theo, do you think they're built to withstand that injury with Andrews out the rest of the year? I mean, he's been, Lamar's leading receiver for a few years now.
I think that they are built to withstand a Mark Andrews injury, although it's certainly not ideal. Like, they can get in 11 personnel and still have plenty of dangerous weapons out there on the field. And the wide receivers that I just named, Isaiah Likely and Kolar, both have potential. Both are really smooth movers for their size, like vertical threats like Andrews was. They're really, really multiple in their personnel. I saw 11 personnel, obviously, 12, obviously, but also a lot of 21 with the fullback Ricard in there, 22 with Ricard and 2 tight ends. I think I even saw 20 with 2 backs and no tight ends out there. And then they, can stretch you vertically. They can run from any of those looks. So I think it's still a plenty dangerous offense to defend. And in an AFC where, the Dolphins haven't really proven themselves to be elite against a good team. The Chiefs are not at their strongest point. The Bengals look to be out of it. The Browns and Steelers are up there in seeding, but it's like they're not actually threats. So I actually do think that they can overcome a Mark Andrews injury, although obviously him and Lamar's chemistry and his ability to separate versus man coverage, like it's a huge loss, but no one really is clearly better than the Ravens right now. So they still might be the best.
It feels like pretty clearly within the AFC, if you're just looking at the totality of the talent on the roster, they have to be number one. And I think that's what we would have said in the preseason. And injuries are always a concern for them. Like, the Andrews thing sucks, but it's a clearly improved receiving core. And I think that when Lamar is playing at this level, you're just effectively guaranteed to have an elite offense. And I think it's
in all aspects, absolutely anything that you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's so remarkable. Like, obviously he is the greatest rushing threat that we've ever seen from the quarterback position, but his efficiency as a passer this year with that improved receiving core has been spectacular. Like, they're a top 5 efficiency rushing offense, which they always are, but they're a top 5 efficiency passing offense. That's just the Lamar impact. And I don't understand why it feels like a lot of people are just waiting for the opportunity to declare that Lamar is overrated. It felt like there was not a consensus, but maybe a majority of people felt that he was the MVP at the midseason point. Doing those polls, we did a show on it. And then he has one down week, a bad mistake against the Browns, and all of a sudden you see a discourse about how Lamar's not really all that. I just can't wrap my head around that. I think that he has been very arguably the best quarterback in football this regular season.
Yeah, he's been elite. The arm talent really has always been underrated with him. And there were so many throws last night where he went deep and the ball just explodes out of his hands. Like, the velocity is crazy with him. He has the elasticity and flexibility with his release where he can make any throw from any platform, throw it around guys, over guys. Like, his release points are crazy, arm talent crazy, or strength crazy. Poise in the pocket, hanging in collapsing pockets. He can do that. He likes to scramble, but he just doesn't care about pressure at all. And if it means standing in there and making a jump pass from, when he has 1 square foot to work with things crashing in around him, he can do that. There really isn't a weakness. Maybe accuracy down the field. They've been, I shouldn't even say maybe, that has been the weakness so far this year, is trying to hit those big plays, but they've been so close on all of them, that you can't really ignore it as a threat. So he's always been a bit underrated. The numbers have been down since his MVP campaign, but again, who has he been working with at wide receiver?
Seriously.
Willie Snead,
Chris Moore, man.
Chris Moore. You guys, Aguilar. Aguilar.
Shout out him for the tutty last night.
He had an awesome touchdown.
Yeah. It's incredible. He's so clearly the greatest play extender ever when you talk about that ability to just make dudes miss in the pocket, even if he's not scrambling. And you see it multiple times every game, like the touchdown pass to Bateman, the almost touchdown pass, which I believe was also to Bateman, where he scrambles for 10 plus seconds, evades multiple sacks, and then still puts that ball pretty much on the money.
That was to Flowers.
Right,
that was
that
was a crazy. And Flowers is like 5'8", you know? Like if that was to Bateman, that probably would have been a score. It was an amazing throw.
Unbelievable ball. You mentioned the variety of deliveries, like the arm angle on that deep throw to Odell. He's just incredible. And I understand that the production individually has been underwhelming the last couple years, but the impact on his offense, the stress that he puts on defenses, how inevitably dominant you're going to be as a rushing attack and how good you're going to be as a passing attack if you just put competent weapons around him. It's so obvious. Like, they put up 29 points per game with Lamar as the starter since he took over, and they put up 17 and change without him. There's almost nobody.
And he has like a
that
Tom Brady
impact.
He has like a Tom Brady winning percentage too.
Yeah.
Like he's pretty good. I've always been a big Lamar fan. The advanced analytics don't always flesh that out, but again, every quarterback stat is a passing offense stat, and you know you can't complete passes without the line blocking and the receivers catching and the coordinator coordinating, and just like now that there's actually attention to detail in the passing game and like the spacing is good down the field, you see what's happening.
I think the reason people have issues with Lamar are for two reasons. One, I think it's the playoff track record, right, that we actually haven't seen Lamar do it on the biggest stage. And then the fact that Lamar holds the ball like a loaf of bread. That's kind of my only knock on him, you know, where he'll get out of the pocket and just kind of, you know, he's just holding on to it. But
Go ahead. You finish your. I've got.
Oh no, I was just going to say I'm so glad that you mentioned his arm strength, man, because I do think that just goes so. It just gets so lost with it, and I know this is the apples to apples comparison with Lamar, but it really does remind me of like if you took Michael Vick like in the mid 2000s and you took his arm from the 2010 Eagles team. Like I think people forget about with Vick, man. He had that same Lamar stuff where it was just the flick of the wrist, man, and it's jumping 40 yards, 50 yards off of his wrist. It looks just so effortlessly. And I think even with 2010 Vic, when he was maximized, when he got out and back in the league, I think Lamar's completely in a different tier, you know, as a passer and as an engine. Lamar's just still criminally underrated and underappreciated, it feels like, man.
Yeah, he's a planet. Everything orbits around him. And the other weakness, you talk about the ball security. The other thing that he does, he is really greedy with the mesh point on reads sometimes, and like he will try to pull it out of the running back's arms like way too long into the play, and he's fumbled a couple of those this year. So that might be another thing that you could look at as a weakness, is like general ball security, not so much because of picks or bad decisions, but in terms of how he holds the football and how he hands the ball off on some of those keepers.
So, considering the Andrews injury, who do you guys view as the best team in the AFC right now? It feels to me like the Ravens and Chiefs have separated from the pack a bit. Who would you guys lean in that conversation?
I said it was the Bengals 2 weeks ago.
Tough with Jake Browning.
Tough. Not anymore. Not anymore. The Chiefs are so hard to discount because of Mahomes and the defense.
Yeah,
and
totally
and the idea of a wide receiver breaking out like at the right time towards the end would probably make them the most formidable team, because I think their defense is just as good as Baltimore's. I don't think the stats quite flesh that out, but just from a talent perspective, I think they're right there. And the Chiefs have very good numbers as well in terms of their defensive efficiency. Yeah. They also don't quite have the same injury concerns that the Ravens do. Yeah. I think the Chiefs are on top until proven otherwise is probably the way I would look at it, and I probably should have said that when I thought the Bengals were the best, but I don't know. I do get concerned about like Odell and Lamar and Bateman, who've suffered all of these crazy injuries. Humphrey's banged up. Like I just don't know if the Ravens will have the gas, and I think the Chiefs are probably the safer bet.
I don't really have a ton to add. I mean, I completely agree with everything you said, Theo. At 5 years, 5 AFC title games, man, it's really hard to count against the track record.
What about the Steelers, though?
The Steelers.
Dude, the Steelers are Theo. I've said this since the beginning of the season. The Steelers are a legitimately bad football team. Like they are a bad football team.
Hey, buddy, winning ugly is still winning.
Hey,
And that's all they do.
I want to ask you guys one last thing about the game that we saw last night. The refs were on one, right?
Yeah.
They were on one. Oh my God, the DPI on, I think it was number 20, the rookie out of Michigan, whose name is
DJ Turner,
me.
yeah.
DJ Turner. That one was they just missed on that one, and then a great block by Odell.
Yeah,
called
dude.
back because of holding. It's like he was in his frame, like within the cylinder the whole time, but whatever.
The Zay Flowers TD broke me, man. It's like they just seem so petty, dude. It really like infuriates me as a fan. Like when you just mess with the rhythm and the flow of the game. If it's basketball, if it's football, like you guys remember that one? The one that made me angriest, I think it was like Chiefs Titans from 5 years ago or something, when Mariota had like 9 attempts at the end zone and they finally got it in. It just points in this game reminded me of that, where I'm like, guys, can we just play the game? All the unnecessary, and I know Baltimore's is like a rowdy place to play, and it was hard to hear, but the delay of game calls, man, it was really excessive, man, and I felt like it messed with the flow of the game.
Yeah, that was part of the reason that the Bengals couldn't play that man coverage. It wasn't just that they were losing, like they lost plenty of reps, but the PI calls, like they just couldn't avoid them. It was a game where the refs were not letting them play at all. So any kind of contact down the field just ruined it. So it was a bad game for man coverage.
I'm going to take a different angle here. I love it. When I turn on my TV, I'm looking for Land Clark. I want to hear his beautiful voice. I want to see him at midfield. That's all that I'm there for. I agree, the officiating sucked. And for me, on the point of the AFC favorite, it's the same line of thinking. Mahomes, and by far the best defense of his career. Now, with Lamar losing as a number one target, as good as Zay Flowers has been this year, and as lethal as he is in space, and as good as Odell was last night, I just think that that's a meaningful hit, and I trust that Chiefs formula so much. And for the Bengals, even if it's just a couple weeks, man, no Burrow for the Steelers and the Jags. Like, you can't win those games with Jake Browning. Poor Jake Browning.
Well, you could beat the Steelers with Jake Browning.
Do you really think so?
Yes.
I think
You could outgain the Steelers with.
Look,
guys. And you will. You will.
Let me get this out. I've been saying this for the past couple weeks too, because we're not going to talk about the Steelers today. Let me scratch this itch real quick.
We could.
If we could. If you don't turn the ball over and you score 3 touchdowns, you will beat the Steelers. That's the formula. It's very simple.
You'll beat a lot of teams if you do that.
Yeah, but also, how is Jake Browning going to do that when they also can't run the football against the Steelers defense? No chance, pal.
I'd probably still take
You guys
Pittsburgh,
are going to get
but you're saying there's not a
sacks.
chance? Carson, I think you forget about all the bad quarterbacks Mike Tomlin has lost to in his tenure, man.
No, I remember all the bad quarterbacks Mike Tomlin has won with, because it's what he's been doing for 3 years. The Bengals, they're in a rough spot, and the AFC, like, the top of it may not be the strongest that we've seen in recent years, but the depth, like when you're looking at those wild card spots, you might have to get 10 wins. Maybe it's just 9, but they're in a very tough spot, and it's a bummer to see Joe Shiesty just have such an injury-riddled season. Obviously, we didn't really see him for the first 3 weeks because of the calf, and then he gets back to that elite form, and now he's dealing with this. That's a bummer. But you know what's more of a bummer, fellas, is the Buffalo Bills. My Buffalo Bills, who are just an absolute shit show. We did a little emergency podcast after they lost to the Broncos, and maybe the worst loss anybody has taken this year, rivaled only by what they did to the Jets in week 1, where they had 4 turnovers and a punt return touchdown allowed to close it. But Theo, what's your take on just the disastrous state there? Specifically, let's start with them firing Ken Dorsey, because I know there's a divide on people who think that that's sort of a scapegoating versus people who think that action legitimately had to be taken. Where do you fall on that?
I think it's a bit of a scapegoating. That's probably more where I fall on it. But I think that if you're Sean McDermott, who said that it was 100% his decision to make this move, and you're the head coach and defensive coordinator of the team, so you're spreading yourself thin. In the meantime, as that is happening, you lose not Von Miller, but he's been invisible.
No,
You
let's
lose
face
Matt Milano.
it. They might as
Yeah.
well have lost Von Miller. He plays 20% of the snaps and does nothing.
Yeah. Matt Milano, obviously the biggest one. Trey White was kind of having a bounce back season, and then he pops his Achilles again. Jones, the defensive tackle, was having a Pro Bowl caliber year, and then he goes down. So he's just putting out fires, and the defense has been fine. And as the defensive coordinator, I don't think he can worry too much about the offense. Like, I don't think that he is probably very involved on that side of the ball. So he has stretched himself literally as thin as possible. And then you've got an offense that should be at the peak of their powers with Diggs, Davis, Kincaid, the offensive line healthy, Josh Allen healthy. Like, basically, this should be the best version of the Bills offense that we have seen. That offense that doesn't have the excuses that he has, basically dicking around, like throwing bad picks, turning the ball over, putting the defense in bad positions that it shouldn't when they are already banged up. I think that's just for a head coach who probably doesn't care about DVOA, who probably doesn't care about EPA. Like, that's a cardinal sin. And he's got to be like, you're fumbling the handoffs. What do you guys work on over there, at practice? And the other thing is, like, he can't really punish Josh Allen. He can't really punish Stephon Diggs. He can't really hold any players that like, you're not going to bench Dalton Kincaid for trying to hurdle over somebody and holding the ball in one hand in the red zone against the Bengals and then fumbling, like, who are you going to put in? Morris, like, you're not going to do that. So for all the mistakes, there's really only one guy who can be held accountable, and that's Ken Dorsey. So I think that just the boneheaded mistakes that the offense has made, although the general results have been good, I think it's just one too many for Sean McDermott. I think that they're pretty unforgivable when you look at how he is probably looking at the team. And I think that he was just like, whether it be a message to Josh Allen that, like, your actions do have consequences, like, you do have to lock in, you do have to limit the turnovers. Like, I think that's what this move was about. But I do think that kind of mindset is a little bit, old-fashioned coach speak, because I think turnovers are something you got to live with, because Josh Allen creates big plays at such a huge rate that it's still a huge net positive. The Bills are number one in the league, like, in success rate right now. They are, like, Josh Allen is at the top of the league in all the passing stats so far this year. And unfortunately, interceptions come with that. But overall, I think that's still kind of where you want to be as an offense. Like, and you kind of live and die by his decisions. And really, this game and week one against the Jets were really the only ones where he was making all these unforgivable mistakes. Like, the stretch in between the first game and the most recent one, like, he's probably the least turnover prone that he's been in his career over that specific stretch. So it still seems like a bit of an overreaction, even though I kind of understand, like, I think why Sean McDermott was frustrated with the offense.
You really do live with the gunslinger and die by the gunslinger. And I don't think the firing was an issue of, has Ken Dorsey been bad this season? Because I think any Bills fan will tell you, and anybody that has watched Bills games will tell you, that Ken Dorsey has been bad. I think that you're right that it came specifically after the circumstances of this game. All the turnovers, all the bad plays with the offense, the fumble on the opening drive, the fumble on the handoff, the bad Josh Allen picks, the bad decisions. And then, again, the specific way you lose this football game, the fact that you have 12 men on the field, none of these things are directed, choices impacted by Ken Dorsey. I think that's why most people took issue with it. So for me, I agree with you, Theo. Like, I think specifically right after this game, I'm not saying it was the wrong decision, but all of these, the reason they lost this game wasn't directly because of Ken Dorsey. And I think it's a lot to ask of a guy you hired, right after the Super Bowl in the offseason, and Joe Brady, to come in here and try to overhaul and fix this offense within the span of the week. Now, I'm not in the facility, so I can't speak to how much involvement he's had with the offense since, joining the facility. He's the quarterback coach. He has been since February, but it's a lot to ask of a guy to step in, take over, and get this team ready to go in such a short, time period.
And I just don't know, like, what they expect that will change. Like, are they going to run the ball a lot more? Like, I don't think you should do that. I like, you have Josh Allen, you have Stephon Diggs. You look at the Chiefs, and the Bengals, two teams that have been the most successful in the AFC over the past couple of years. They're always at the top of the league in pass rate. Like, when you have that caliber of quarterback, I get that run game isn't really part of their identity. I think that's okay when the offensive numbers look like they do. So it's like, is he going to call the game differently? Like, I don't really. Carson, you're a Bills fan.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had any problems with Ken Dorsey's offense. I thought it was like, it wasn't revolutionary or anything, but when I watched it, I didn't say like, holy cow, like they don't know what they're doing with Diggs. They don't know what they're doing with the run game. Like they don't know. They even ran the well versus the Broncos. So
ran the ball very well.
So it's like, I don't necessarily, it's like just got to be like a culture move. Like all of a sudden Allen is going to be like on his best behavior. But it's like he was from week 2 to 9, basically. I don't know.
So here's my take on it as someone who watches pretty much every single down of Bills football. First of all, I think you guys both make a lot of very good points. Logan, if there are not 12 men on the field, something Ken Dorsey has nothing to do with, he does not get fired at this point. Like that was the culmination of the disaster, and then it became, all right, well, who do we blame for this? And people turned to Ken Dorsey. But I do think that is very much justified. And everybody's looking at a lot of the advanced numbers and how successful the Bills offense has been if you just take out the turnovers, the backbreaking bad plays. As you mentioned, Theo, number 1 in success rate. They're the number 2 third down offense. They're a super efficient red zone offense. My take is just that doesn't have anything to do with Ken Dorsey. That is 100% a Josh Allen product. Josh himself carried 3 straight top 3 scoring offenses before this year, twice led the Bills to be the number 1 third down offense, and he did that without super inspiring skill position talent alongside him. Diggs is obviously amazing, but Gabe Davis as a number 2 target was really suboptimal. The line has had very mediocre stretches, and he still is going to single-handedly make you an elite offense. So the numbers just don't move me when I believe Josh could lead the Bills offense to that success with really anybody calling plays. And then I do have pretty concrete issues with some of the decision-making from Dorsey this year. I thought he was a bad situational play caller. And I think one thing that any Bills fan will have a gripe with, and it's very specific, but it is just painful and it speaks to a lack of situational awareness, is this obsession that Dorsey had with these delayed handoffs out of shotgun, particularly in goal line situations, which is inexplicable. You have like the most powerful athlete at quarterback there. If you're going to run the football, maybe use him. If you're going to run the football with a traditional handoff, why would you do it out of shotgun? Or you could run some sort of RPO, right? Get Josh out there in space, weaponize his athleticism. To just say, all right, let's get a delayed handoff to Latavius Murray out of shotgun, it basically never worked. And so then you're just like, what kind of guy do we have calling plays here? Another thing that was frustrating was the continued emphasis on having Josh run the football less. And I understand that people want to protect his body, but I think Josh is kind of Superman. Like, obviously, he got banged up last year. That was the first time he's been hurt at all in his career. And
that was on a big throw, too, wasn't it?
Exactly.
On a run? Yeah.
Yeah. And so people talk about, oh, he can't take these unwarranted hits. But it's like this dude has been unbelievably healthy throughout his career. He is generally going to be bigger and stronger than any linebacker that's crashing down on him, certainly than any DB. And part of what makes him so special is that improvisation, is that willingness to go out there and try to make these crazy high upside plays, because way more often than not, that's actually going to work out for you. And he's running the ball fewer than 5 times a game this year. Under Dable in 2021, that was over 7. The RPOs have also really scaled down to 5 a game this year versus 7.5 in 2021. So some of the stuff that Josh does best, I feel like they've gone away from. And then consistently, I understand that the overall numbers for the Bills offense are very good, but as a first half offense, they have been abysmal for 6 weeks. They're averaging 7 points per game in first halves since that Jags game. Every single time they're playing from behind against these teams that just aren't very good. And I think that Dorsey bears responsibility for that in not building a rhythm for Josh. Oftentimes it feels like the opening drive is just sort of disjointed. Like maybe they open with a handoff that gets stuffed and they're not setting up the quick passing game, where I think Josh is really effective when he's dialed into that mindset. People talk about how he always wants to take the home run, and yeah, maybe more than the average quarterback. But what I always talk about is how quote unquote game manager Josh, cerebral Josh, is phenomenal. Like, go look at the Raiders game that he played earlier this year, where he basically doesn't take any shots downfield. He's just dissecting over and over and over again. He can be a great offensive player like that. And part of it is personnel, I think. Like, I probably undersold coming into this year just how the weapons had regressed since the peak of the Josh Allen offense when they had, and I understand the production is similar, but when you had John Brown as a really high-level deep threat, and more importantly, when you had Cole Beasley as such a great possession receiver, a guy who could attack the short and intermediate areas. Kincaid has really come along, but Gabe Davis is just so raw and so inconsistent with his hands and just not good. So I think that's a limitation as well that sometimes makes them far too singularly dependent on Diggs. And then I do think he's just not a creative play caller. Like, Dable would draw dudes open in a way where I was like, wow, man, like, you made that happen. The fact that you came up with that route is the reason that this was a successful play. I almost never feel that way with Dorsey. And we have one of the lowest motion rates in the NFL. I know that that's obviously not, like, singularly going to represent creativity.
The more motion you have, the better the offense.
Yeah, of course not. But it's like, there's not really
there's nothing new. Like, it's and I think especially in the run game, it's not he's not like he's not good at mixing the run game in throughout the course of the game. I feel like it's a lot of times it's like, okay, this is going to be a run the football drive, and they just like do it. And that's what happened versus the Broncos, and they called the same exact play over and over and over again. And that's not bad because it was working. They were calling that power play out of gun. And they literally just did it over and over and over again. They were like, but the reason why it works to me is not necessarily like that's just a great play call, like what a job by Ken Dorsey. It's that you throw it so much, defenses are worried about Josh Allen. You get the light boxes, and then when you just like are going against the Broncos front seven, you can get some traction on the ground. It's not necessarily that it was like wonderful play design or game calling. I feel like mixing in the runs throughout the course of the game and like being balanced throughout the course of the game isn't really there. It's like it's almost phases where it's like pass, and then it's like shit, like okay, we got to run it a little bit more, and then it's run. Yeah. It almost seems to happen in streaks like that with his play calling. I think that Ken Dorsey, certainly the issues aren't all his fault, but I don't think that he's some elite offensive coordinator either. But at the end of the day, I go back and forth on it, and I think, he probably didn't deserve to be fired for his performance, even though I agree, Carson, Josh Allen makes your offense's floor extremely high when you have a quarterback like that. And the numbers that they're hitting right now have more to do with that than Ken Dorsey. And in a lot of their metrics, they're probably like, when you just watch the Bills offense, it does feel like they're operating closer to their floor than their ceiling since really the Dolphins game.
Yeah.
And I think you guys make a lot of great points. Carson, the talent regression, another guy that you don't mention too. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders is a dream number 2 to have too, I think the biggest condemnation of Dorsey is what you talk about with the opening drives. I mean, guys plan all week long for the opening game script against a defense that is going to come out and normally run what they run, and for them to be that unsuccessful is huge. Reading more into this firing, I mean, I think this says more about Sean McDermott's job security than anything else. This is such a move of desperation. This signals to me that McDermott is scared that if the offense doesn't turn it around, the strength of this football team, that they're going to miss the playoffs, and he's going to be fired if they miss the playoffs. To me, that's what this move says more about this team than anything else, is that they are in serious disarray and that McDermott is scrambling. Like,
they had to do something. Like, he feels like he has to do something.
But
he mentioned the opening game script, by the way, Carson. Like, in the press conference, he said, like, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the offense to basically come out hot.
And that's another thing. Just when we talk about the offensive numbers, we have to think about where those numbers were at after week 4, when they had hung 38 on Vegas and then 37 on Washington and then 48 on Miami. They were humming. Since then, they've taken a real step back. So when you talk about it not being solely a Ken Dorsey issue, Theo, I'm with you. It's not that he's an exceptionally bad play caller. I just don't think he's a good one. And I don't see a reason to be complacent when you have a Josh Allen level talent and things aren't going well, and you can attribute, to me, a real portion of that blame to the offensive coordinator. Like, I'm just not good with average when you have Josh Allen. I think they should be pushing to have, first of all, a better head coach. I think McDermott should be gone at the end of this year. I don't think he's elevating this team anymore. I do think he's a good defensive coach. I think he's a good guy in terms of building culture. But I think what takes this team to the next level is a great offensive mind, is a true innovator, a guy who can enhance even the strengths of this Bills offense that already exist. And so to me, if you just looked at this year and said, oh yeah, the Bills went 8-9 and they regressed in basically every way, but they retained everybody because they're still not bad, that to me would be missing the point. Your goal is to get the most out of these guys and the most out of this window and to win a Super Bowl. And this year has been a huge, huge disappointment by that standard.
Yeah, the other guy who might be on the hot seat is the GM. I mean, they're drafting and really the offensive talent around Allen. I really didn't like the Kincaid draft pick. I'll say that. Like, I know that he's come on pretty strong here, but I just feel like having just this big slot receiver isn't the type of threat that they needed. They need a real second star next to Diggs, and it's
100%.
To run back Gabe Davis again after he got his opportunity to be wide receiver 2. He got his opportunity for a breakout year, and it just didn't materialize. And then to run it back with him, like I don't know why. In that Cincinnati playoff game, I thought it was very clear, like there wasn't really a lot of talent on that field outside of Diggs and Allen. And to go back at it with Gabe Davis again after he kind of showed that he didn't have what it takes, like expecting a huge leap for him for no reason was a bad gamble. To draft a tight end and a guard, like, okay, how much does that really move the needle when there's such a glaring weakness in the receiving core? I don't love how they approach this offseason.
We have seen some rookies come on from the draft that they passed on. I mean, Theo, would you have preferred them taking a Sam Laporta, a different tight end?
I had Sam Laporta graded higher than Kincaid, although Kincaid has been quite good. So it's not like all his fault. I just think, like, in terms of the resources, I just didn't think they added enough offensive talent to get over the hump. And I think that's the number one thing more than play caller that they need is like someone. Diggs is going to get a lot of attention. It's all about winning the one-on-one on the other side. And it's like Davis, 0 catches, 0 yards against the Bengals, a huge drop that turns into a pick. He doesn't move me. And the Bills are more focused on making hope core TikToks than
well, hold on now. Hold on.
Than
they
practicing.
Kill those.
They got to scale it back though. They're putting too much effort into it.
Dude,
it's like, what do they practice? It's like they're filming like this very advanced meme that takes like 500 edits. It's like that's what they're doing during the week, and it shows.
I think that's good for workplace culture. Did you see the TikTok they did with Kincaid where they were like having him fill in the blank? And so it would be like, Jesse, we need to, and then he would say cook. He actually didn't get it right. And then the one that they ended on was blank in Paris.
Do they ever, does the defense ever take part in these videos? I feel like it's always Grape Davis and Allen and Kincaid. Whereas the defense is locked in. The offense at practice is out filming TikToks on the sideline all day.
I'm not going to exculpate the defense here, though. I don't think the defense has been good. And to be fair, it's basically a second-string defense at this point. Like when Micah's out and Benford is out, you're missing a majority of your defensive starters. And when Von Miller sucks, like the pass rush overall, I think the front has really progressed nicely. That's where they have hit in the draft with Epinesa and Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau. I think that bringing in Leonard Floyd was a very good move. So even with Vaughn sucking, like they're still doing okay there. But to me, and you hit on this earlier, the season ended for the Bills in the first half of that Jags game when Daquan Jones and Matt Milano went down on the same drive after they had lost Trey White. That was it, because that just completely tanked what this defense could be, and they've been awful on third down. I think they're 23rd. They just can't get on the field. Losing Daquan, he was so important as a run stuffer. They've sucked there. They're 29th in rush yards allowed per attempt. They're 24th overall in defensive yards per play. So when that group has regressed so much and injuries are a huge part of it, and you're having these offensive issues, it's just a recipe for a disaster season. And that's what they've had. And then, they have 14 turnovers in their 5 losses. That has obviously been killer as well. And you're absolutely right, Theo, when you talk about it being a personnel issue offensively too. There's not an elite athlete on this Bills offense in the receiving game. Like, Diggs is amazing, but when you're talking about a guy who has game-breaking speed or, a big dude who can make those big-time contested catches. Like, I guess Gabe's not even that big.
Kincaid's a pretty good athlete for the tight end, but he can't block.
He's a good athlete for tight end.
Yeah.
But I agree with you.
True.
When you're talking about
you put him out there in the
allocation.
slot.
Yeah.
You put him out in the slot. Is he a better athlete than like the average slot receiver in terms of creating separation? Yeah,
exactly.
I guess.
Like, you watch him move, and you're like, oh, wow, this dude moves really well in space. But then you're like, yeah, he moves like
For
maybe
a
an
tight
average
end.
receiver in space.
Right,
yeah.
right. For a wide if you're judging him on the wide receiver scale, which you need to do because he's their
he's their number two receiver
slot,
by far.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that it was just kind of a lot of errors team building around Allen. That there were some decent ones, but just never that home run. Just never that. Like, oh my God, T. Higgins, like,
oh my God.
We drafted that offseason that the Chiefs had where their offensive line went from horrible to Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Joe Tooney. You just need a home run out of the park. And maybe Von Miller could have been that if he didn't tear his Achilles last year, but he did. And it's just never really come to fruition for the Bills. And, Allen opens your window for a long time, but it might be time for a new kind of era of Bills football.
If they had traded up 2 to 3 picks and gotten Jordan Addison or Zay Flowers, do you guys feel differently about this offense?
I do. I think that would have been better. I think that would have been better. And I always remember, and I've talked about this a lot on podcasts, like an underrated turning point was when the Chiefs traded in front of them and took Trent McDuffie, and they were forced to settle for Khair Alam, who they did not want to draft. Like, they were visibly disappointed in that draft video that they weren't able to get McDuffie. And McDuffie looks like a all-pro, and Alam is a healthy scratch. So that was another opportunity where maybe they could have had a home run and just got outfoxed by the Chiefs.
Yeah, Khair's the biggest miss of the Bean era, I think. Definitely when you're looking at first rounders, like, to be unplayable, that's pretty rough, man. So the Bills' disappointment continues. I was interested in your perspective on this, Theo, and I think that lots of good insight there. In the NBA, the game can change in an instant, but no matter how the action unfolds, DraftKings Sportsbook has your back. This week, new customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets just for betting $5 on basketball. Win or lose, you get an instant dub.
Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. New customers can get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on basketball, only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code NERDS. The crown is yours.
So we've talked about injuries a lot already on this show, but the one that was sort of the breaking news at the start of this week was that Deshaun Watson is out for the year with a shoulder injury. We've seen consistently throughout this season this be a nagging issue. They say it's a non-issue, but then he misses starts, and now it's official that he's going under the knife. So what does this mean for the Browns?
Not much, honestly. I think that he's still they're still paying him a lot of money. He's still going to be the starter next year.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that he took the leap that he needed to take in the second season. I know that he was playing a little better recently, but still, even versus the Ravens, there were plenty of reps where I was like, I just don't know what he works on at practice. I don't know what he studies. I seriously don't. Like, it doesn't feel like there's a single concept that the Browns have that he feels really good about. Like read option, he makes the wrong decisions on read option. He keeps it when he should hand it off. Like quick game, he holds, like there'll be things wide open for him and he'll hold it. Like he doesn't go through his progressions. He holds it, and if it's not there, he bails on stuff all the time. And that was the case during the Ravens game. And then in the second half, when his shoulder was messed up, they were basically like, it's a must check down type of environment. And yeah, he was able to be accurate underneath. Sure. Like congratulations. But really the biggest plays in this game were a blocked field goal, were 2 picks by Lamar. So the run game was going, and they were able to mount a comeback with really conservative play calling, which like is kind of fluky to me. So I just don't ever think that Watson showed the precision, the accuracy, the timing, any kind of rhythm that he showed on the Texans this season. And there's absolutely no quarterback stat out there, DVOA, EPA, accuracy, sack to pressure ratio, or assigning him blame for when he does go down. Like all of it would suggest that he's been a bottom 10 quarterback in the league this year. He doesn't crack the top 20 in any major stat that I could find. So like Browns fans can say, he's turned the corner, but it's like, what kind of the corner from 25th to 22nd, in the league? Like who cares? So they have an elite defense and a quarterback that probably limits their Super Bowl ceiling. And I think that was true before the Watson injury, and I think it's still true now, just to a bigger degree. So I honestly don't think it changes much for them.
And moving forward, you're right. It doesn't change a whole lot for them either way, because you are handcuffed to Deshaun Watson. There's not really anything you can do. It was an unprecedented contract when he got it, a fully guaranteed
and one that hasn't been surpassed since it happened, even with all the quarterback contracts.
Because it's the dumbest contract in NFL history. Nobody should ever give out a contract like that. I mean, that's the really messed up part about it, Theo, is you talk about you don't know what he does in practice. Deshaun Watson quite literally has no incentive to, play football or to get better at football. There is no incentive. Like, most guys don't need that. Most guys are internally motivated and love football and love getting out there and playing hard. Some guys do need that fire under their ass. You remember Albert Haynesworth? He got that bag and then got fat. He couldn't run from one side of the field to the other, man. Like, there was no incentive after that point. And you're right, Theo. We're never going to see another contract like that. It is the most mind-boggling, baffling contract ever, especially to Deshaun. I completely agree with you, though. They're 6-3 with the worst QB play in the NFL. This defense is number 6 in scoring, number 1 in DVOA. They're the number 1 third down defense in the league, number 4 in terms of passing yards per attempt, and number 9 in defensive rushing yards per attempt. This season, the Browns' QB room is 207 passing yards per game, 8 TDs to 12 picks, with a 57% completion percentage and a QBR of under 32. But never fear, gentlemen. Never fear. Joe Flacco is coming to save the day.
Joe Flacco.
Wow. Joe Flacco is coming to save the day.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Theo. You talk about people saying that Deshaun, turned the corner. He's played a game and a half of good football this year. He has mostly been really, really bad. And when he was healthy, we were saying, well, the one thing holding the Browns back is quarterback play. And whether it's been him or PJ Walker or DTR, of course he's better than those guys. And yeah, I guess he was trending slightly in the right direction, but he's still sucked this year. Logan reads out those quarterback stats. He's responsible for half of that. And you have 12 games now between last season and this of meaningfully below average quarterback play from him. So I don't have optimism. And yeah, he has a $64 million cap hit in 2026.
Wow.
We can beat this horse to death and then beat it while it's
dead.
How
much is the cap hit overall? What's the how much money do they have?
It's
man. How are they going to pay the defense?
They're not. They're legitimately going to lose great defensive players, and this roster is going to regress because of what they have to play Deshaun. But that's just the bummer to me is how great this defense is and how they've even survived the Chubb and Conklin injuries to still be a 6-3 football team right now. If they had above average quarterback play, this would be a bona fide Super Bowl contender. But guess what? The football karmic gods are making them pay for an ethically questionable decision, and that's just going to be the case for the next 5 years. I don't see Deshaun being good again.
No, it's. I mean, if it didn't happen this year, I get maybe last year saying, well, when he was suspended, he couldn't even practice with the team. So when he came in totally cold, and they averaged 13 points a game in the performances that he started, which is obviously atrocious. So going into the year, it's there's really no evidence that he's any good at all. But you have all the offseason to get familiar with the playbook. If there's one, maybe he looked more accurate this year. Maybe he made more plays with his legs. He didn't look like he understood the concepts any better. And it's not like he was getting the ball out of his hands quickly and or trusting any kind of scheme. And that was blatantly obvious even in the Ravens game. So next year, I know that 14 for 14 stat in the second half is going to be used to hype up the Browns again. Look at what happened the last time we saw Watson. It's yeah, man, sure. I think that they're going to get overrated next year.
And that's
Jerome Ford is good, though. I'll give him that.
Jerome Ford's still carrying my fantasy team right now. That's the other baffling aspect of this to me, Theo. Like you mentioned, we had 6 games of not bad QB tape, like horrendous QB tape, and the Browns
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, let's go into this season with an XFL quarterback and a rookie quarterback as our backups. Let's trade Josh Dobbs
Josh
the
Yeah,
day
they
before
had
the season
Dobbs.
starts." And no, get this, and let's let Jacoby Brissett walk to Washington too, man.
Also
like
true.
two of the best quarterbacks you could ask for to back up your guy in your room, and they just let him walk. The Browns is the Browns, man.
It's
Through and
Browns
through.
type shit, bro. It's Browns type shit. This is what they've been doing forever. It's unreal, and I totally agree with you, Theo, when you talk about like his discomfort in this offense. He is so much more reliant on his athleticism and just bailing on plays. And of course, he's always been great out of structure. It's a huge part of what made him special in Houston, but he was also just like a really good pocket passer. And
Yeah.
you don't see any of that. He's spraying balls over the field. He can't get through his
D-Hop
progressions.
merchant.
Wow.
He didn't have
Wow.
D-Hop in 2020, did he?
Did he actually not have D-Hop that year?
He was crazy that year.
Yeah.
2020 was nuts because I
No,
think
he
it
was a top 5 quarterback.
He may have been the best that season, considering the supporting cast he had to work with. Because I'm trying to remember who wide receiver 1 was that year.
It's
I think he had
Fuller,
Cooks.
right?
He had Cooks. He may have had Fuller. It may have
look
been
this up.
Brevin
Wow.
Jordan
Wow.
as
Can you
number 3.
can you get the 3? You got Cooks and Fuller as the 1 and 2.
Oh shit! Was Snead there at that time?
No, dude. This is
No, Willie Snead.
This is
That's the
disgusting.
second
This is
Snead
disgusting.
mention.
I've got it up.
Is Chris Moore? Was Chris Moore there?
He's a boy. He's a boy of yours, Theo.
Yeah, you know this guy.
Knows your organization well.
Randall Cobb.
Randall Cobb was the number 3 receiver
Shit.
that year. Yeah. Kiki Kati got in on the phone.
Kiki.
Wow.
How could I forget Kiki Kuti? Damn.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
Was Brevin there? Or did Brevin? Was he a tight end? He's a
I-
dog in Madden. That's all I really can say about Brevin Jordan.
I don't think so. Jordan Akins was their tight end. Darren Fells was their tight end too. They had Cal
Fells.
Bears legend Chad Hansen out there. This is ridiculous. Like 20 dudes caught passes from Deshaun this year because even the receivers he did have didn't stay healthy. Fuller missed a handful of games. Cobb, Kuti, ridiculous stuff. Okay,
Yeah, he played. Yeah. He played out
So-
of his mind.
he really did. Talk about the Browns making it to this point at 6-3 with all this bad quarterback play. Who's a team you guys look at right now, good or bad, and think their record is the most misrepresentative of what they actually are as a football team?
Besides the Steelers,
Well, you can go Steelers. Logan declared we weren't going to talk Steelers. I think they're a good candidate here.
it's definitely the Steelers. It's got to be. I feel like, I mean, they've gotten outgained in every game, right? That's the stat that's going around.
It's unbelievable. We went through and looked at like just their yards per play in every category. They're 20th or lower as a pass offense, pass defense, run offense, and run defense. Like it's just obscene.
I will give them this. They are average running the football. And
Let's go.
below, that's about as good of anything you
Hey,
could say.
last couple
Is
weeks.
Minka coming back?
Minka is apparently. We're reportedly starting some guy named Trenton Thompson this week.
The safety play has really been
Abysmal.
abysmal since he's
Dude,
been
Thompson was getting cooked by Jordan Love, man.
Hey, whoa, that feels personal.
Whoa. Jordan Love balled against the Steelers. I still have hope. I think the Steelers, with their passing offense and their line, and I don't think really Pickett's the guy, and there's not really a third option besides Pickens and Deontay Johnson, who each have like a fatal flaw, which is unfortunate. They're both really good at something. Like Johnson's a great separator. Can he catch? No, but he can separate. And then Pickens, he can catch, he can't separate. So like if they did the fusion dance, they'd be crazy. But like to have two receivers who are like flawed in their own right and then not really a number 3 with a bad quarterback and bad offensive line, and to me, I like it's just a bad offense, and bad offense doesn't usually. It's not a good enough defense because the safeties are so bad, and like the outside corners outside of Joey Porter have not been great. Like it's just not a very talented roster.
No, I mean,
but
top to bottom, we're not great. And I think you point out, think about the teams that we've lost to this season: the Texans, the Jaguars, the Niners. Niners are legitimately good, but with the Jags and Texans, it's like if you can reach a requisite average level offensively, and again, not screw it up, you beat the Steelers. I will say, I think our line's been better. We've started Broderick Jones. He is the man. Awesome run blocker. Monster. I think James Daniels has been great on the right side. Our right side of the line has been phenomenal, and I think getting Canada on the sideline with mixing up the running game with Warren and Najee has really been helpful. Theo, I think you're exactly right about Kenny Pickett, though. When your quarterback is that limited, like Kenny's, I don't know, man, 28, 27. I haven't gone through all the QBs. I mean, he's bottom 5 for me. He stinks. And like you said, we've been without Pat Freiermuth, too, for all season long, so it's really brutal not having another guy that you can count on. It's a struggle to get to 20 points every week with Pittsburgh, and if our defense doesn't completely shut down the other team, they have no chance of winning. Yeah, no. The Steelers stink. Will they make the playoffs? I don't know, man. That seems
They have
really...
a very easy schedule.
Yeah.
Very, very easy.
Yeah.
I still wouldn't go with the Steelers. I think they're low-hanging fruit. I'd probably go with the 49ers. I think that a lot of people booted them out of their top 10 after the skid. They add Chase Young. They have still some of the best skill talent in the league, a top-notch offensive line. And again, if Brock Purdy plays well, they're a top 5 team in football. So I'd probably go with the Niners just because I don't want to bag on the Steelers any more than I have to here. So I'll say San Francisco just because a lot of people I know are completely off the Niner train after their little skid.
Really? Interesting. I would not be out on the Niners. I think that they are a decent candidate just because they have 3 losses, and I would still have them as a top 3 team in football. The Steelers do make a really good case, man, just because they aren't good and they're 6-3. The one thing I will say is that we can't act like this is totally unsustainable just because it is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they were a terrible offense last year. They were the number 26 scoring offense. They had a significantly negative point differential, and they won 9 games. And 2 years ago, they were the number 21 offense with a significantly negative point differential, and they went 9-7-1. Like, they just do this, man. The Duck Hodges, Mason Rudolph year, they put up 18 points per game. They were the number 27 scoring offense. And they won 8 games. And, like, this is the weakest defense of all of those groups, but they still find a way, dude. They still get defensive touchdowns whenever they need it. I don't know. Is Tomlin the GOAT? Is Mike Tomlin the sorcerer?
Is Mike Tomlin the greatest?
He is, and he's
ever?
also not, because he also keeps, like, he's part of the reason that the offense has been so bad in the first place, because he's the one that keeps Matt Canada employed. I did a big study on the Steelers' offense last year for some reason. I charted, like, every single offensive play that they made for, like, the back half of the season. By the end, I knew their play calls. Like, I could tell you exactly, like, not even by the end, by the middle of the second game, you're like,
all right,
end around.
Literally, I don't know if it's the case this year if they have, like, this version, but last year it was if Miles Boykin or Gunnar Olszewski is on the field, it is going to be a zone run. Like, they are going to go into motion, work across the formation, and try to cut at the legs of the guy. Like, if they are on the field at all, that is 100% of the time what is going to happen. It's like they're going to move across the formation and either block, or it's just going to be a little pass out to them in the flat. And it's like that over and over and over again. Like, Canada, and every passing play is like stick. Like, someone take it up the sideline and then just someone break towards the sideline real quick and hit him out there.
He's been better on, like, the last 2 games on the sideline, but it's still a very predictable offense. I will say the one red flag I have about this team, outside of what you guys have already laid out, I am really concerned about the linebackers taking a real step back. Lose Cole Holcomb for the season. They lose Quan Alexander last week to an Achilles injury. So our starters are now Landon Roberts, Mark Robinson, and Michael Walker. Those are the guys getting the reps in the middle. Robinson and Landon Roberts, good tacklers, good run stoppers. They cannot guard anybody over the middle of the field. So I am, despite us having an easy schedule the rest of the way, I am really worried about, with the Minka injury, with the 2 guys in the middle gone, I am worried about them kind of getting dissected over the middle of the field.
Robinson will be an interesting.
He sucks,
Theo.
He sucks, Theo. He sucks. I'm not gonna lie. He's slow. He's small. He can tackle.
He's tiny.
He's small,
he's
dude.
tiny.
He's really small. He's like 5'11", I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll be interested to see, like, the type of season he has here as a starter. I remember him coming in last year, and I was like kind of intrigued, but I wasn't ready to call him good. But I was intrigued mostly because of like the number he wears and his body type. I'm like, what? He's like number 93, and he's like He's like a 5'10", 200-pound linebacker. I was like,
it's pretty hard.
What is happening here?
That's pretty hard.
I think a team that might be better than their record suggests, or like general consensus right now, it might be the Bills, just because they do have Josh Allen and they are at the top of a lot of the offensive stats because they have him.
Yeah.
At 5-5, like there might be another stretch like he had weeks 2 through 9 where like the turnovers do get better and they put a lot of points on the board. Like I think they're always capable of it. And maybe Vaughn does get worked in a little bit more somehow. Like what if they just beat the brakes off the Jets this week? Like I think it's very possible that they do. So as a 500 team, I think that they're prime candidates to like if anyone can work their way back into the playoffs, it's a great quarterback like Josh Allen. I saw Rodgers do it a bunch of times, like RELAX, and I really feel like we can run the table. Like sometimes these quarterbacks just find a way to go God mode and get it done. So they might be a team that's up there. Same thing with Justin Herbert and the Chargers. Like he looks back these last couple weeks. Like he's playing at an unbelievably high level. Nothing else about the Chargers roster moves me at all, but like just because you have that, like you're going to be a pretty formidable threat.
Yeah. I think the Bills are a good candidate just in that they are not a like 5-5 level football team. They went into last week second in point differential, but at the same time, this is 6 weeks where they haven't felt like a good football team. And
they're not Super Bowl contenders, which is like all Bills fans care about. It's not like, oh, we're better than our 5-5 record, like hang the banner. It's like, it doesn't matter if you're not winning the Super Bowl, but the Bills might be better than their record currently looks.
Yeah, and they have a brutal schedule down the stretch. They have to play the Chiefs. They have to play the Eagles. They have to play the Cowboys. They do have the Chargers. They're capable of beating any of those teams. They have that level of upside, but with the defensive regression and with all the offensive issues right now, they're not that much better. The schedule's insane.
They might be better than their record, but it might never come to fruition in this back half of the season. Yeah.
Exactly, because you had to beat the Jets without totally beating yourself. You had to beat the Broncos without totally beating yourself, right? If you were sitting at 7-3 right now, all right, you can stumble your way to 10 wins, and maybe it's underwhelming, but now it's like you have to actively beat teams that are better than you to make the playoffs, and that feels like a tall ask. I will say on the flip side of that 5-5 record, and I sort of already took a shot at this team last week, but I think it's insane that the Raiders are 5-5 right now.
Yeah, man.
Like, this is such a bad offense. The quarterback play has been so bad all year. Their wins are narrowly escaping the Broncos when they were at their worst, narrowly escaping the Packers, narrowly escaping the Pats, and then they actually beat up on the Giants, but then narrowly escaping the Jets. There's just not a single team that this team does really well. Like, obviously, Max Crosby is amazing, and this defense has been respectable, but it's still not a great defense, and the offense is awful, and I just think they are going to get boat raced in this upcoming stretch of their schedule. And I said that last week. I said they were going to lose by 150 to the Colts, and some people got upset by that. Everybody was saying that I had clearly bet $10,000 on them to beat the Jets, and I'm like, no, guys. I'm just having a little fun with the Raiders. Antonio Pierce, ASU legend,
Jack
Antonio
Jones.
Pierce. Jack Jones coming back.
Let him cook.
Can't wait to see how he gets in trouble. That's going to be exciting. He and AP reuniting, man. That's like peak Shaq and Kobe when it comes to getting into trouble.
I wonder if Mark Davis will give Antonio Pierce the head coaching nod if they finish it out somewhat. I don't think they're going to finish strong because I don't think that their offense, I don't think their line is good or their quarterback is good so it'll probably come crashing down. They were able to beat the Jets in a game where basically their only offense was like get the ball to your playmakers on the perimeter via screen, and like the Jets could only get field goals even though they were moving the ball on the defense. Yeah. So it's like I don't think they're going on any kind of winning streak here, but if they do, you got Mark Davis, the poorest owner in the league, who just gave out 10 and 6-year deals to head coaches. He might just be like give me the guy who worked for the vet minimum probably and Antonio Pierce for this franchise.
Yeah, and just like catastrophically bad hires, even if you took out the contracts, like such big misses.
Gruden was a good. Hey,
I
cannot say I'm not a John Gruden stan, but he was good until
Agreed, but embroiled in scandal and
Yes,
therefore
yes.
having to be fired is still a pretty big red flag.
It is.
I still think that makes it a legitimately bad hire.
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does.
I
Okay.
just wonder if Antonio Pierce is going to give Mark Davis a lineup. You know what I'm saying?
Antonio Pierce would never be embroiled in this.
Surely now they've hired the most clean and honorable coach that there is in all of the land.
After two egomaniacs that the team fell apart under, they've hired someone with a spotless
The
track
Raiders,
record.
man. There is nothing and nobody more beloved than a new head coach who wins opening week and who talks about how they're going to rebuild the culture and they get what it means to be part of the organization. And they're telling these stories about how, like, at Long Beach Poly, they're up 60 at halftime and he's got them running gassers for the whole 15 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, all right.
Did Jaden Daniels attend Long Beach Poly? Do we know this?
I don't think Jaden Daniels did, but a lot of ASU guys did. He recruited a
Yeah.
lot of dudes from
He
Long
recruited
Beach Poly.
Daniels, right?
I think he did. He was a really good recruiter. Yeah.
Well, it was all illegal.
Of course, looking back on it, there were some other factors at play.
The FBI has been building their case even those
Dude, yes.
that case dropped like something was happening when we were there, and we
Yeah.
are now all gone, and they still haven't said what's gonna happen to us. That's how big they're like trying to get their ducks in a row for like 3 years before they like wipe Arizona State off the face of the earth. I guess.
Dude, I think AP is an industry plant. I think they had to get him to NFL head coaching status so they could get the most resources dedicated towards the impending investigation. Jack Jones is a Long Beach Poly guy. So,
Yes, he is. That's why I asked. I'm like,
Yeah.
is Jaden Daniels to the Raiders imminent that they're just building the Long Beach Poly ASU team, which could still happen. I was just trying to see if the pieces really fit with the high school connection.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels would be interesting. He's Southern California, but I don't think he's Long Beach Poly. But all right, so we've talked a little bit about some of the storylines that might fit into this category. But as we wrap things up here, just over the course of this season, what's one thing that you guys have heard discussion about, that you guys have heard a narrative developing about in terms of like mainstream NFL discourse that you just think is totally wrong?
I'll go. Caleb Williams is a bust dialogue.
Oh, that's a great choice. Great choice.
Caleb, he's still my QB1. I think Drake May is fantastic, but Caleb is very special. I think that his tendency to hold the ball for a long time and make things happen out of structure is overall like a positive force for the USC offense, which is why he does it. I'm not necessarily sold that he can't do anything else. I just think that like he just breaks every tackle and, you know, can make any throw from any angle anywhere. So it's like, why not? And I think Lincoln Riley really encourages him, and Cliff Kingsbury, who's encouraged this behavior every single place that he's ever been, is like, just man, hold it. And like, we're going to design a second life into these plays. And like, you're going to, it's an offense 100% dependent on Caleb Williams making those plays. So he does, and he does. I think that he has exhibited a really special ability to make plays. And just because he's not a pocket passer doesn't mean that he's not a good football player. I think he's been the best football player in every single game that he has ever played at USC. So, or at Oklahoma for that matter, like just a truly dominant force at the college football world. He gets a lot of comparisons to Zach Wilson, who, you know, was all out of structure. As someone who is low on Zach Wilson coming out of BYU, like he was playing New Mexico Tech and looking like the best player out there. And a lot of his plays were seriously jump balls to Dax Milne, who was an NFL player. A couple of his offensive linemen were NFL players. Like, that's just not really the case in the Pac-12 with USC right now. Like, they're not that head and shoulders above everybody, like in terms of. So being low on Caleb Williams after this USC losing streak where Alex Grinch allows 50 a game, I think is totally unfair. Imagine Caleb Williams with a defense that was like normal and like, or a coaching staff that was like interested in a normal game script 21-28 game. Instead, it's like on him totally to make plays and put up 60 every week, and he does. So I think that he's a pretty special prospect. Maybe not perfect like he does. like when there are open guys that maybe he turns down. Like what he does is unsustainable, but I think that he can be different in the NFL. I just think like right now he kind of has to play differently because the defense has been so bad. So I'm still a huge Caleb Williams fan.
Do you think Caleb's the best prospect since Trevor?
Since Trevor? Pretty easily. I mean, who's been there since? Maybe looking back on it, maybe Stroud should have been because he kind of was perfect at OSU. Like he was amazing in like his accuracy was super high level on all kinds of concepts down the field. Like his accuracy was good on the move. It was just like, well, how much will this translate when you go from Ohio State with everyone around you as a first round pick to the Texans? And clearly the answer was everything. So maybe like looking back on it, Stroud should have been viewed as more of that guy by me and really everybody besides Chris Sims. Shout out Chris Sims for he was really the one that was pounding the Stroud drum, so I got to exclude him in this. But like most analysts, I think, felt pretty similar to me, where it's like we just don't know how it'll translate outside of that situation. So, yeah. But I like Caleb more than I liked Stroud at the time. Lawrence was the first year I scouted anybody. I really liked Lawrence. Like his pocket presence was immaculate, like huge arm, like great reading the field. So he may have checked more boxes, but you know, Justin Herbert might check more boxes than Mahomes right now in terms of skill set. That's kind of how I feel about May versus Williams. Is like as a pocket passer, May is better.
Yeah. But
still, what Caleb's doing might be more impressive, you know. So we'll see how it projects. But yeah, I think Caleb's definitely the best that I have looked at since Lawrence. I mean, there was the Ritter year that. The Howell, Ritter, Corral. Like that, I think that was the only year in between. Yeah.
Are we ever going to see a year like that again? Kenny, of course, but like
Malik Willis.
I hope not. I remember watching Malik Willis, who is like projected to go like number 2 in the draft, like in all the mocks. I'm like, this guy looks undraftable. This guy looks dog, like terrible.
Yeah.
Same thing with Corral. Ritter and Pickett I liked Ritter the most, but I didn't like Howell either. But he's probably the best.
They're all fringe NFL starters. You know, you got 3 of those guys out of the class, so that's something. But I'm totally with you on the Caleb point. I think he's incredible. It's crazy how fast you can go from generational prospect to
Zach
bust.
Wilson.
Yeah, to Zach Wilson. Based really just on team results and maybe painting nails and crying after a football game,
and the Notre Dame game where he
he was legitimately bad, right?
But even watching that Notre Dame game, like you can tell he's the best player out there. Like he was just forcing shit, you know. Yeah. Like the picks were horrible, but like just watching him move around, like you can tell that there's no Notre Dame player better at football than him. He just made some bad mistakes, you know, which obviously isn't good, but. You say that like bad mistakes don't make Josh Allen a bad quarterback, like a lot of people say. You know, I think it's kind of the same deal.
I'm 100% with you on the upside of great creators like that, totally outweighing. And it's obviously not like Caleb's been mistake prone. He had a mistake prone.
No, he's thrown like 14 picks in 1,000 career pass attempts at USC. Yeah. It's not like bad picks are a common theme with him. I think he's incredible.
Not at all. I really do think that if USC had like not a bottom 10 defense in all of college football, everybody would still be frothing at the mouth over Caleb. So it's a silly way of viewing things.
There is a quarterback that does like to throw pretty bad picks, and that's where I'm going to go with this question. One narrative that's been developing during the season is that Tua is a legitimate MVP candidate, which I just baffles me, man. I don't even think Tua is the best MVP candidate on his own team, dude.
You're talking to the right guy.
Yeah. I mean, his numbers, 2006.
Bro has found the choir and he is preaching to it.
Go on.
I don't get. I know statistically, like you can look at the numbers: 2,609 yards, 19 TDs, 7 picks. Whoop-de-woo. You know the Dolphins are 6-3. The teams they've beat have a cumulative record of 13-34. They've beaten 3 of the worst teams in the league: the Pats twice, the Giants, the Panthers. In victories, I'll give them credit, 320 passing yards, 3 TDs, 1 pick, 70% completion percentage. But against the 3 real teams they've played, or even remotely real teams, Buffalo, Kansas City, Philly, they lose all the games. He goes from 320 yards to 230. He goes from 3 TDs to 1 TD, and he goes from 1 interception to basically 1 turnover per game with less than completion percentage. And I feel like all the big plays that I think of with Tua are just missed throws or wounded duck picks. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm not... Shout out to Tua for being good in the system, man. He's not a top 10 QB, and he damn sure isn't an MVP candidate. Like, if we're going to reward somebody on that offense, can we please give it to Tyreek? Like, I don't know, man. I don't get it week in, week out.
He's probably a top 10 quarterback, especially now because all the other candidates have gone down with the injury. But he's not in that elite tier. Mm-hmm. The accuracy and the rhythm and the timing, I think, is all very impressive with him, and not everybody could do it. But like, I think especially versus the Chiefs, it was clear like he's such a liability out of structure. Like he's got nothing. And on those deep shots, like it's clear that he's a pretty bottom tier NFL athlete. And I just don't know how you could give him the MVP over a guy like Mahomes, who has the same numbers, but his wide receivers are way worse than what Tua is dealing with. And I think even Kelsey has lost a step this year, unless his girlfriend is in attendance. The tackles have been bad in Kansas City. The guards, like the interior of the offensive line, which is usually a bunch of all pros, like hasn't quite been up to their usual par, although certainly not a negative force for the team. And he still has numbers just as good as Tua and is at the top of all the advanced analytics in terms of quarterback play. And like the structure around him is not what Miami has right now. And he's actually beat good teams, Miami being one of them. Obviously, the head-to-head doesn't really matter, but still, he's gotten it done against like better teams than Tua has. So
yeah,
I don't know where the argument for Tua MVP comes from. Not that he's not in the conversation, or maybe like if you were to make a top 10, maybe I'd put him in there because there's not that been that it hasn't been a good year for NFL like offense in general.
No.
So for the quarterback of the number one team, like, yeah, sure, throw him in there. But to put him over Mahomes right now, or even a guy like, I think Dak, like I'd probably vote for Dak above Tua or a couple different quarterbacks. And yeah, Tyreek, like
Lamar, Hurts, man.
Lamar, yeah, Hurts has been so much better recently too. Yeah, I'd probably put them over him as well. So I don't think Tua's trash, but he's not an MVP candidate.
I feel a bit bad, honestly, because whenever we talk about Tua, it feels like we are just trying to bring expectations in the conversation a bit more down to earth, and sometimes that can come across more negatively than intended. Like, of course, Tua doesn't suck. Everything you guys said, I totally agree with. When he is able to throw with ideal timing, his anticipation, his placement is excellent. But he is so privileged. He throws to his first read, I think, more than like any other quarterback in football, because his first read is pretty much always great.
It has to be, because his time to throw is like 2.3 seconds. So it's like clearly things are working pre-snap, because and like you can just make that decision.
Exactly. He's playing with, I think, the best offensive coach in football. He is playing on the fastest offense that I have ever seen. So I love the way that you articulate this, Theo, when you say that quarterback stats are always passing offense stats. It's just 100% true, and people try to make these apples-to-apples comparisons. You can't compare Tua's stats in a vacuum to Josh Allen's, and one of them is doing so much to go above and beyond creating and trying to overcome circumstance, and the other is just doing a good job of executing an offense in an incredibly privileged situation, and then we've seen it. Like, Logan, you mentioned the stats in the 3 games against the good football teams. I think those are the only top 20 scoring defense that the Dolphins have faced this year. Like, those are the only respectable teams that they've played. And I saw it in person against the Bills. I was at that game. And when you're able to get pressure, when you're able to disrupt that timing, when you're able to force him outside of the pocket, it's not just that he can't make those high upside plays. That's when he starts to melt down. And that's when he starts to get careless with the football and make some of those killer mistakes. So I think that we all agree on this, and we are literally
him and Brock Purdy both. Him and Brock Purdy both, because Purdy's numbers are just as good, if not better, than Tua's, and he's not an MVP candidate.
Yeah,
to me,
they're very similar, and I think that Purdy does do a little bit more creating out of structure. I think he's a little bit of a better athlete. He's got a little bit more of that magician in him, but for the most part,
but he's worse at the timing and accuracy part of it. I would say.
Agreed, and I think that he is probably a bit more careless with the football as well. I think they both have those like head scratching interceptions more often than some people might think, but Purdy, I think, is more prone to trying to do too much probably, whereas Tua sometimes it's just like, oh, wow, he literally can't get that ball there, or, he is under pressure and things start to fall apart a little bit. Very quickly, I think that, Theo, your Caleb take sort of reminds me of the Kyler Murray situation that we were looking at, where everybody decided before this year, not everybody, but there was a significant portion of the NFL fandom that was like, oh yeah, this guy's just not good. And you would see these quarterback tier lists, and it would be like Daniel Jones 2 tiers above Kyler. And I think
I remember that one.
Already in his return, we have been reminded of what he is as a one-man offense, how uniquely great he is extending plays and creating outside of structure, and the arm talent that you see on the throw to basically win the game last week, and how he extended that play as well. Like, Kyler's really good at football. I do think that Arizona is going to move off him. I think that situation, it just seems like the relationship is fractured. But I think that if they do, they are going to get a real haul for him, and I think that he can be a really good quarterback on a really good team with a better roster and situation.
I don't know if they'll move off of him. But I agree that he's a valuable quarterback and an engine to the offense. And if you're a team like Minnesota without a starter, and I could see it happening. If he shows that he's like worth the contract, and the Cardinals have a really high draft pick, and they have the opportunity to add Caleb, who I think is like better than Kyler Murray, like a better prospect than Kyler Murray. I could see it happening, but I also think you could get a haul for that, like a way bigger haul for that first overall pick. And if you already have Kyler, you might trade that Drake May chance to get an absolute. I mean, they already have the Texans pick.
So would you view it as, if they get the number 1 pick, which they're probably not at this point now that they have 2 wins, but they still could? If you had number 1, would you take Caleb and trade Kyler? And if you had any other pick, would you trade the pick or draft outside the quarterback position and keep Kyler?
Man, it's tough to say. And it's tough to say when you don't know what the market for Kyler is like. I would say
true.
If the market for the first overall pick is like way bigger than what you'd get for Kyler, boy, I don't know. I'd probably trade the pick because you get so many resources. Like, you could get maybe 3 firsts, and like you could build a really, really good team. But if it's like even, I don't know, maybe you take Caleb on the rookie deal, and he's probably pretty Kyler-esque in the first place, so you're just kind of resetting that timeline. You already have a bunch of draft resources. Why not need more? Like, you probably don't need too many more, like, to build a good team. It's a fascinating. I don't know about the behind-the-scenes stuff. I think with Kingsbury and I guess Bidwill is still there, the owner, who's terrible. So maybe he's and they did put in that video game contract clause in his contract. So you could be right.
That's a real component in my thinking. Is it just feels like the vibes and the relationship are bad, and also like the fan base. Maybe this will change. Maybe they'll see now how bad things can be without Kyler, and he'll come back and maybe he wins them a couple games in unbelievable fashion. Then they're like, oh wow, he's our savior. But it felt like everybody was kind of just done with him, like Cardinals fans, and there comes
Cardinals
a point
teammates, honestly.
Cardinals teammates, and obviously they gave him the massive contract. But when you're 5 years deep with a relationship and it feels like things have stagnated, sometimes it just runs its course, and it's not a question of the talent of the guy. It's just like, all right, this situation, we're kind of done, and we're going to move on, and we're going to try to pivot. And if they do get a high enough pick this year, and if they do have a quarterback talent that they like enough, I could really see that happening. And I do think, as big as that contract is, teams would move a lot for Kyler, because a game-changing quarterback talent like that, it's what literally everybody is looking for. So it's gonna be interesting.
It's the most fascinating like dynamic in the league right now, easily. There's no one else that important who's maybe Justin Jefferson, but like I think Kyler's more likely to get moved. So
unfortunately,
it probably is him.
Stephon Diggs may be in those conversations now.
Stephon Diggs is in those conversations.
Oh, what a bummer. What a bummer. It's also surprising. I did not think Kyler was going to play this year.
Yeah.
I just thought, like, with where the relationship is at, where the Cardinals were at, if he's going to miss until week 10, I thought maybe they would just let Buddy sit this one out. But it's fun to see him back out there, and I think it's going to drive up his trade value. I think Kyler playing more football is only going to be a good thing for him and for the Cardinals if they do want to move him or if they want to build around him. So, Theo, it's been an absolute delight to have you, my friend. You guys know where to find Theo. Of course, he's on TikTok at Theo Ash NFL. Makes just, I would say, the best football content on the platform. Really awesome film breakdowns. You will inevitably learn if you watch a Theo video. And, of course, he does the Stay Hot podcast. As we said, we had Matthew on earlier. He is also the man. So really, really awesome content there as well. You guys are, of course, sponsored by Little Caesars Pizza. Theo is not an ASU alum, but yeah, that, by the way, I want that reflected in your contract. That should be an extra $20 for you guys that I just said that. But pretty cool. The three of us, we were all just there at ASU Cronkite freshman year doing the damn thing, and here we are now. How about that?
That's right. You got your flag with your coded message.
Yep.
Who would have thought?
And again, please do not reveal
you got your
what that
volume
means.
hat.
Yep.
Dude, I don't have any blue wire swag. I don't have any blue wire swag. I should get some, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's been
Anything else?
It's been crazy. It's been crazy. No, thanks for having me on, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's always an honor.
All right. Well, it was an honor to have you, man, and it was a blast as always. So, if you guys want more of our content, all of our full shows are on YouTube with video at our page, the Nerd Sesh page. We have moved off the volume page, still with the volume, love the volume, but just every volume show has its own individual page now. So if you're wondering where Hoops Tonight is, if you're wondering where 3 and Out with John Middlecoff is, all of those are on their own YouTube pages. And you can listen to our show across audio platform. All audio platforms, same as ever. You can follow us across social, TikTok and Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh, and you can check out that volume hat and the NerdSesh flags along with other assorted merch at thevolume.com. That link is in our link tree across our social media bios. If you need to get a late Thanksgiving gift for somebody, you're panicking. Oh my God, what did I get my wife for Thanksgiving? Nothing, as per usual. Look at me, negligent husband. She would love, I'm pretty sure, nothing more than a Nerd Sesh flag or maybe a Let's Play Today's Hoop Grid shirt with our faces on it. If I know your wife, that's what she's going to want for Thanksgiving. So that's pretty much it for us. You can join our Discord too if you just want to talk basketball, football, be part of our community. That link is also at our link tree. So with that, as always, Theo, great to have you on. Appreciate all you guys for listening. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And I've been Theo Ash.
Nice. And this was Nerd Sesh.